Welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to go through part 2, chapter 9 of the book titled Dominion and Power, The Science of Life and Living by Charles Brodie Patterson. This book is in the public domain. I am Daisy, your hostess, and if you're new to my channel, welcome. And to my subscribers, welcome back. Hopefully you're enjoying this book. One takeaway real quick before I start on our next chapter. It is from the previous chapter titled The World Beautiful. And he was referring to the beauty in the world. And how and why would that be important in this whole thing about the science of life and living? And I believe he tied it all up in a nice little bow when he said that we get out of life all the harmony, all the joy, all the perfection, all the beauty that we put into it or that we bring to it. And that we cannot find beauty in the outside world until we find it inside our inner world. So pretty much it's like what we cultivate inside, that's what we're going to be projecting outside. And when we project it, then we see it. So everything will become beautiful to us if our quest for beauty is thorough. If we seek that beauty inside of us, then that is the expression that is going to be outside. He also used an example of like a painting and saying how some people will look for the flaw, and then when others are looking at the painting, they will actually go out of their way to point out the flaw for others. And you know, it really made me think of, it does take so much more effort to appreciate all the beauty and the discipline required to choose to take the high road, to choose to see the whole, or to choose to see the wholeness because of the flaw, and to actually reserve it to oneself. You know, we don't have to be broadcasting our opinion about a flaw that we are seeing. Maybe for someone else, that flaw is not anything to even discuss. And I guess that's part of that human nature. So at the end of the day, when we choose to see the wholeness, we actually get more out of life. That's what I took out of that. All right, let's get ready to flip the page to the next chapter titled The Religion of Life. A quote by Emerson. There was never so great a thought laboring in the breasts of men as now. It almost seems as if what was aforetime spoken fabulously and hieroglyphically was now spoken plainly. The doctrine, namely, of the indwelling of the Creator in man. What is the scholar? What is the man for but for hospitality to every new thought of his time? Have you leisure, power, property, friends? You shall be the asylum and patron of every new thought, every unproven opinion, every untried project which proceeds out of goodwill and honest seeking. All the newspapers, all the tongues of today will of course defame what is noble. But you, who hold the not of today, not of the times, but of the everlasting, are to stand for it. And the highest compliment ever received from heaven is the sending to him its disguised and discredited angels. End quote. The above quotation is one from Emerson's lecture on the times, and what is said of the receptivity of the mind of his day can be even more truly said of the popular mind at the present time. The light that then only a few saw brightly is now shedding its effulgence over the minds of the many. The world is coming to see and understand life as it has never done in the past. Multitudes are reaching out for greater knowledge and understanding. The mysteries of the past are being unfolded. The things that were held secret are being disclosed. Life is in a state of ferment. Never was such mental activity displayed in the past. The world is writing its history, its book of life, with a rapidity that is simply bewildering to him who is not abreast of the times. Destruction and construction go hand in hand. The tearing down of the things that were held sacred in past generations and the building on their ruins of more enduring structures is taking place on every side. One of the greatest lessons of life, perhaps, or the one that may be the hardest to learn, is that there must constantly be new adjustments made by man, both to environment and to his fellow man. Every new ideal brings with it a new work to accomplish, and in the accomplishing of that work, there will inevitably be the destruction of all that is no longer essential to the new ends and purposes of the now larger life. The conservative man views with alarm the overthrow of his cherished ideals. To him, the world seems to be going all wrong, and the very foundation of religion and morality being destroyed. But this view exists solely because he is not attuned to the new order of things. The evolution now in progress is largely a conscious one. To him who is unconscious of the inner changes, the destruction taking place on the outer plane may seem revolutionary in its effect. But once let him become attuned to the spirit of life, and lo, he will see that everything has been working together for good. Mankind is beginning to perceive that law and order obtained throughout God's universe, and that conformity to this law and order is the one object of life, and so men are consciously using the power that is within them to create a new world, to manifest a kingdom of God on earth, to bring the hidden power and glory into external existence, and so prove that the soul is not dependent on things, but the soul makes things, that the religion of life is disclosed by life itself. Realization comes through action. We are beginning to perceive, too, that the soul of God and the soul of man are essentially one. As man realizes his relation to the oversoul, he will come to understand that he is the creator of the world and the things of the world in which he lives. That the divine ideal is written into his life and through his own effort must take form on earth. He is the Word of God, the Logos, seeking to become manifest in the flesh. In him is the light which is to enlighten the world, and all external things must come into conformity to his will. The new heaven he has discovered is his own life, is but the plan of the new heaven on the earth. You can never make a new earth without an ideal to pattern it after. It is necessary to perceive the divine pattern in order to create the perfect and complete human expression. First, we must have the vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Then we must bring down this vision to the level of every day, interpret according to the needs of each succeeding moment, weave it into the life in loving service to our fellow man. He to whom the vision has once come can never wholly forget. The beauty and the glory of it will by degrees transfigure his life. Old things shall pass away, and all things shall become new. We are in a state of transition wherein there is a seeming conflict between the night of the past and the coming of tomorrow's dawn. To the superficial observer, the very foundations of life seem to be shaken, but nothing can pass away but the scaffolding, as it were, of today's greater building. The old conditions were only stepping stones to the new and better ones. Change is the great law of mental and physical growth. Everything in man's outer life is subject to it. Everything in the great outer world responds to this law of change. Nothing is permanent. The mountains grow old and pass away. The valleys are filled up. Change is as inevitable in the mind of man as it is in the outer world. Mental development only takes place and is evidenced through change. Man's ideals must make way for the incoming of greater ideals. What people are pleased to term consistency is often but a superficial barrier erected to obstruct the light of truth. The mind, to be courageous, should be unencumbered by authority or traditions of the past, and should not place any limitations upon its own growth. The thing which may prove of incalculable assistance today may on the morrow, if still held to, prove a millstone. Life is a constant process of adjustment to environment, and the helpful thing of one day may become the fatal thing of the next. In order to live, one must grow on, and every stage of growth has its change, and each change is fitting to its place. Let the one who longs for permanency know that the thing desired is unattainable, that a height attained is followed by the vision of still greater heights, that life is forever upward and onward. What the world needs most today is a willingness to change in order to meet the demands of the age, a readjustment from the old, dead things of the past to the vital purpose of the living present. Many people are still living in the graves of the dead thoughts of bygone ages. These thoughts may have met the requirements of the past, but no longer fill the needs of the present. The inevitable results are that we have numerous organizations apparently for the sole purpose of charitable and religious effort, which are lifeless bodies without soul or spirit, sepulchres filled with the phantoms of a dead past and superficial modern conventions. If change is needed anywhere, surely it is needed now among those who think they are in the van of human progress, but who in reality are living in the dark ages 1,000 years behind the times. And yet, I want to say at the same time that the quality of stability is as necessary as that of change. This may seem contradictory, but stability has to do with the soul, while change concerns thoughts, words, and outer forms. Love is as eternal as life. The world may change and pass away, but hope abides. The sun may grow cold and lose its light, but faith lives eternally. While in the inmost recesses of life all is steadfast, on the surface all is change. God never changes, life never changes, truth never changes, but our mental conceptions concerning all three change constantly. As the mind of man comes in closer touch with the divine in man, it attains to the wider, grander vision, as one who stands on the mountaintop is able to view the whole horizon. The mind, which has immediate access to God, becomes fixed in the eternal principles underlying all life, and there comes to it a greater stability of thought and purpose, changing the outer expression to a thing symmetrically beautiful, increasingly so with each succeeding change, until the very outermost takes on something of the stability and permanency of the inner. Let the mind be founded in the eternal verities of life. The mind should become so centered in principles which change not that only the highest ideals would find expression. A purely intellectual conception of the kingdom that is latent in every soul is an impossible thing. The servant cannot comprehend in all its fullness the master's will, and intellect is but the servant of the master. What a man feels is greater than what he thinks, and thoughts and words are but feeble instruments to express the inmost depths of man's feeling. The light that is coming into the world, that is shining over the threshold of the new day, shows that a man to be great should feel after God and come into vital touch with his fellow man through his deepest and truest feelings. This being the case, the true thought, word, and deed will follow as a natural sequence, and man will thus truly express himself from the center to the circumference of life. The love and adoration of the people of both the past and the present time for the Christ or the Buddha have not been for their intellectual conception of life, have not been for what they have taught, but rather for what they have revealed and what they have lived. Their loving service to humanity has endeared them more to humanity than anyone or all other things. Loving service comes from what a man feels. The new commandment of life, which is just as new now as it was 2,000 years ago, is that ye love one another. That love is the fulfilling of the law, and that only by it and through it can come the fullness of life. Let the individual remember that that which is true of the nation or the race holds good equally for himself. That each man epitomizes, as it were, the whole feeling and thought of the world, and in his life passes through every phase that it is possible for the race or the individual to experience. Hence, in the consideration of a religion of life, the personal application is the initial one, perhaps the only one that is of immediate profit. The kingdom of God is brought upon earth through individual effort, and every individual is responsible for its coming to the extent of his knowledge. In fulfilling the law of life, it will be found that it requires far more a development of heart than of intellect. The intellectual reconstruction of the world is an impossible thing. No matter how clearly men may see the truth, if such truth is held only as an intellectual conception of right, wrongs will be perpetuated by man upon his fellow man, regardless even of true thought conceptions. Intellectually, man knows 100-fold more of the right than he lives. But if a man feels, he lives what he feels. 1,000 men have written books on the cruelty and injustice of man to his fellow man. But the love of a Jesus or a Buddha would outweigh in its productiveness of good all the logic and mental reasonings of the 1,000. What the world needs more than all else is kindness of heart, goodwill, more brightness and hope, more joy and gladness, more faith in mankind and its ideals, and greatest of all, more love. Through the expression of all these feelings, the mind of man would become renewed, quickened, strengthened, made whole, and the world would rejoice in the springtime of a new age, an age wherein righteousness would cover the face of the earth as the waters cover the face of the great deep. The prophets for this new age are needed more than they'd ever were in the past, because humanity as a whole is more ready to receive a life-giving gospel than ever before. Humanity is hungering and thirsting, and the desire for a fuller life is being everywhere expressed. What the prophet Emerson believed he saw in his day is being fulfilled in our own. But there is a mightier power at work than Emerson's intellectual conception of life. It is not man's intellect that creates the world. It is not man's intellect that renews life. And not by any thought or reasoning process do we find God. Let the prophets of the New Age proclaim not what a man should think, but rather what he should feel. Let them make a new departure, no matter what ridicule or censure they may bring upon themselves from those who do not understand what they are trying to do. The true reformer in every new departure has had to contend with all manner of persecutions, coming even from those to whom he would do the greatest good. Let no obstacle, great or small, stand in the way of this gospel, that what a man feels makes him what he is. When we look about on every side and see the dried and withered forms of people, misshapen and shriveled up by their thoughts because of the lack of vital feeling, we feel constrained to cry out, "Oh, that God would fill the minds of people with the spirit of his love and goodness." The mind of man makes its own divisions in religion, its creeds and its dogmas, and of these divisions there seems no end. The soul knows no division, has no sense of separateness or limitation. For it, none of these things exist, because religion, the homing instinct of the soul, is one, a common need, a common impulse among all peoples. It may be summed up in two words: love and service. Love is the divine element, service the human expression. Before these two conditions of life, every creed shall pass away, because the time is coming when the world will know the truth and enter into its true inheritance, a kingdom of God on earth where peace and goodwill reign supreme. The spirit of love lives in every life and is ever seeking perfect expression. Through it, every thought becomes beautified. Through it, every ideal is realized. Thought becomes great only as it expresses truly the feeling beneath it, as it is filled with the spirit of love. The mind becomes illumined only as it draws its vitality from the soul feeling. The barriers which now separate mankind and keep men of different faiths apart will be forgotten when the real religion of life finds its place in the hearts and minds of mankind. We will have a new symbolism, one which will truly represent a universal religion, and we will no longer then worship the symbol, for it will serve only to indicate in an outer way what man knows and believes in his heart. And man's creed, if there be any, will be the recognition of human rights, of justice for all, from the least even unto the greatest. There will be everywhere that fraternal expression of life too, which will make the brotherhood of man something more than a name, a living, vital thing. There will no longer be any desire to oppress the weak. The strong nations of the earth will lend of their strength for the upbuilding of the weaker. There will no longer be the very rich, and consequently there will no longer be the very poor, but each will have enough to supply all mental and physical needs. The love of the beautiful, too, will become a part of the new religion of life, and the handicraft of the world will be more beautiful because of it. Each man's work will be his religion, and whatever his hand finds to do, he will do with the might of a beautiful ideal as well as an earnest purpose. Health, strength, and happiness will be the natural outcome of such a religion which will dispense with all outworn creeds and empty forms, which will not even ask whether a man be a Roman Catholic or a Protestant, a Jew, or a Mohammedan. The balance of true fellowship will so unite its members that each one will become a law unto himself as regards what he thinks. No one will be taken to task or questioned about his beliefs or unbeliefs, because where love is, there is freedom. There is unity. There is peace and satisfaction of life, where a man comes into at-one-ment with God and man. End of chapter. Stay right here, my dear one. We're going to go ahead right here in this video and move on to the next chapter. So sit back and relax. Chapter 10. The Realization of Power. A quote by Browning. Life is to wake, not sleep. Rise and not rest, but press from earth's level, where blindly creep things perfected, more or less, to heaven's height, far and steep. I have faith such end shall be. From the first power was, I knew life has made clear to me. Strive, but for closer view, love's just as plain to see. End quote. Another quote by Browning. All we have willed or hoped or dreamed of good shall exist, not its semblance but itself. No beauty nor good nor power, whose voice has gone forth, but each survives for the melodist. When eternity confirms the conception of an hour, the high that proved too high, the heroic for earth too hard, the passion that left the ground to lose itself in the sky, our music sent up to God by the lover and the bard. Enough that he heard it once, we shall hear it by and by. End quote. It would be difficult, I think, to find many agreed on any single definition of power. Some take a very limited view and deny the existence of power if it is not clearly demonstrated externally in word and deed. But there are those who realize in themselves as well as in others far greater power than is at the moment expressed. A power which in a sense should come under the direction of one's thought, and yet a power which is greater than any reach of the mentality. Now, in reality, all power is the same, that is, from the same source. But there are as many degrees and expressions of power as there are degrees and expression of life. We can understand any phase of power, in fact, anything, only as we ourselves come into possession of it. We may perceive power, but that is a different thing from the true understanding of it. The real understanding of power goes far deeper than any surface knowledge. It touches the springs of wisdom itself. Now, the direction power takes is dependent on a man's thought. The dynamo of direction, however, is back of thought. To develop power on any plane, there are certain requirements to be met. There is a law governing this as well as everything else. If this law is complied with, the attainment of power is inevitable. Even on the physical side of life, where it would seem as if all might attain, there are few who live up to their privileges and opportunities and enjoy perfect physical power. But development on this plane is as necessary as on any other. One may say it is inevitable because there must be development and realization on every plane. Real religion is living in accordance with the law of one's being. Belief is of small, if any, service. We must study carefully to discover the laws of life. At one stage, it is very well that the life should be regulated from without. If we eat or drink too much, we suffer physically. If we transgress any law on the material plane, we suffer materially. In this early stage of development, there is no possibility of evading the pressure of environment. At this point, the life has to be adjusted to surrounding conditions. The higher has, it seems, to be subjected to the lower. Lower only in the sense of being immature. Man on this plane is but little higher than the highest order of animals. The biologist tells us that there is not as much difference between primitive man and the animals as there is between the highest and the lowest of the animal creation. Insofar as man succeeds in keeping in harmony with his environment, power is the result. This keeping in harmony with one's environment may, to some further on in the path, seem but a poor achievement. Indeed, actually, but in some phases. But we must make allowance for the difference in point of view. It is sometimes difficult for one to recall and have patience with the experiences and demands of lower stages. The very fact that they were once our own is apt to make us intolerant of them. When we come into the possession of power on the higher plane, it should embrace power on all lower planes as well. People are keenly alive today to the value and pleasure of athletics. Some phases of these sports are positively brutal. Animals would not indulge in any such pastimes. But this simply shows the desire to exercise power in some degree. This desire for action, the expression, the realization of power, would better take this form than none at all. But directed control of effort toward a high goal is the thing to be striving for. Suppression is not control. Suppression is never good or helpful. Even hate in the mind is better expressed than hidden and covered over. Hate, is only inverted love, misdirected energy. To let our emotions, whatever they may be, come to the light is like letting off steam when the pressure is at the extreme point. To suppress means disintegration and destruction. One may say, I am suppressing my feeling toward that other person because I do not wish to hurt him. But the truth is that conscious hatred is even more subtle and baneful in this form than the open, outspoken word. Because people who are sensitive will feel it, and not knowing from whence the influence comes, will either give it undue consideration or misinterpret its meaning. Expression is the law. Any expression is better than none. This is written in the constitution of things. On the intellectual plane of being, there are not the same forces to be confronted as on the lower plane, but where there was one obstacle there, on the mental plane, there are a score, not only external things, but subtle, intangible difficulties. Here are encouraged all numberless traits of the mentality with their distorted counterparts. These distortions, of course, eventually merely show by contrast the right path, but a certain amount of energy is expended, even lost in the experience. There is another difficulty too. On this plane, we are frequently not nearly so much concerned with the directing and living of our own lives as we are with the lives of other people, and we spend far more time thinking over and dwelling on other people's shortcomings than our own. Such a habit of mind saps our powers and continually makes for limitations. We are not in a position to think clearly and see things as they really are when our minds are filled with distorted and critical views of others. You see, we are really not capable of judging anyone. We cannot know all the circumstances from every point of view regarding another's action, and even if we could, we cannot say of any course that it is absolutely wrong. It may be wrong for us, or under certain conditions for others, but under other conditions it might be perfectly justifiable. If we could ever be sure of our premise, we could reach some logical conclusion in our judgment of other people. But however faultless our reasoning might be, we can never be sure we are giving just judgment, because we can never be absolutely sure of our basis of reasoning. We waste a great deal of time reasoning out theories of life and trying to adapt them to other people's lives. If we ever hope for a realization of our latent powers, then we must set ourselves to intelligently using those powers for ourselves and let other people alone, both as to thought and action. But someone may say, is it not right to try to influence others for good? Certainly. But we can be of more use through living our own lives and perfecting them and realizing our own powers than ever we can be by trying to share our own immaturity and imperfect theorizing with all we meet. We can be of a far greater service to the world by contributing to it our own lives, lived in the best way that we know, than we could in any other way. Whatever we see and know of truth, it is for us to give out again in action in our lives. This is our message, our mission to the world. Our own right adjustment brings more harmony to others than a whole lifetime of trying to set them straight. We rarely know ourselves more than superficially. How can we expect to know others? An honest study of our own lives will teach us as much. We fritter away our energy day after day, and yet we wonder why we cannot accomplish more, why we're so depleted when the day is over and still so tired when we wake again in the morning. Our strength is dissipated by all sorts of idle thoughts and words. Some energy goes into the thinking of every thought. We can never realize power until we learn to expend energy only with a purpose and to conserve our strength. When the mind is centered and engrossed on the purely objective side of life, when we live too much on the mental plane, there is a loss of energy because it is all output, and there is no ingathering or inner refreshment as there would be if we would live more on the spiritual plane. That is where our refreshment comes from. It is at the center of our being that we rest and realize power. In listening to a lecture, for instance, if the exercise is a purely mental one, we are apt to be tired afterward. But this should not be so. It should be as in enjoying music. There should be no mental effort to understand. But in entering into the spirit of it and becoming one with the lecturer, we would absorb, as it were, all that was of any service to us. Whereas, if we assume a critical attitude, or even if we tax ourselves to remember what is said, we will thereby expend a certain amount of energy and in a way defeat the real object of the lecturer. The words that were used are not the important thing. We can get far more benefit by simply holding the mind receptive and letting it naturally assimilate its own as it comes than we can by thinking hard, as the phrase is. This should serve as a test of the usefulness of anything to us. If we thereby get a fuller realization of power, for us it is a good thing. No matter how good or wise anything may seem to others, or may really be for others, if it does not, in the doing, increase our power and, in this way, the harmony of our whole lives, it is not for us the best thing. We generate energy in our states of restfulness either when we are asleep or awake. But the continued receiving of energy depends upon how we use it. We live in a world of cause and effect. On this plane, the law is inexorable. Even the least things produce a definite effect. There is no such thing as getting a good effect from a bad cause. Every so-called evil or hurtful thing that comes to us has its corresponding cause, and this cause is not external to us, as it may seem, but primarily in ourselves. Nothing returns to us that has not gone out from us. It affected the minds of others and prompted them to do just these things we now complain of. Now, how can we come to such a realization of power so that we can nullify evil effects, prevent evil causes, throw off all disease, and make a thoroughly harmonious life. And this will depend largely on our use of power. There is no limit to the power that may be realized in us. Our knowledge or application may be limited, but the power to which we have access is not. At this very moment, each and every one of us has power sufficient to become whole and harmonious on every plane. But we must use the power we have in the right way. There are some things that we do almost daily, perhaps, which invariably make us feel worn out and depleted, while after others we feel well and buoyant. Now, such results prove conclusively when we are using our powers rightly and when we are not. Harmony, as a result, is a pledge and a seal. A wrong cause could not produce a harmonious action. We limit our realization of power a great deal by our moods and feelings. It is impossible to realize power in a morbid atmosphere. It is not difficult to distinguish the real from the false when our desire to do so is earnest. The actions and states of mind that result in a feeling of gladness and freedom, we may be reasonably sure are the right actions and mental states for us. Joy, brings us very close to the heart of things, very close to God. When we are morbid and unrestful, we are getting away from God and seeing things in a partial way. When we feel a certain pressure from others on our lives, we resent it. We feel unkindly toward them and have the impulse to express this unkindness in action. And we do not realize that we are injuring only ourselves when we yield to these impulses. No earthly good can come to us or to anybody else from disliking other people. From every standpoint, even the very most practical and detailed life, it is better to love our enemies. We are members one of another, and we only deprive ourselves of the greatest benefit and the realization of our greatest powers when we do not see this or are not willing to act in accordance with it. We must learn to feel for others as we feel for ourselves. The golden rule is the greatest law of life. It might just as well have been translated another way. Whatsoever you do to men, men will do to you. And this would have been quite as true. This is the law, and it is a very just law. Now, if we could only learn to live in accordance with that law, we would come to know the realization of great power. I venture to say that a literal and invariable adherence to this law would make whole, mentally, physically, and spiritually, everyone who truly tested it. The greatest law of God is summed up in those few words. We all know so much better than we do, but simply to know is not the thing. We must feel and do. If we feel, we cannot fail to do, and what we do for ourselves, we do for others as well. We must let our light so shine that others will see it. We must not want everyone to do as we do. There's only one way to truly influence people, and that is to be our best ourselves. After all, it is the inner life that gives the power, and we can learn a great deal of the inner life in a very few years of outer life. When we look about, we see this one and that one, someone, perhaps, who calls out love on every side, and we wonder why this is. Is it because that one gives out hate? No, but because love has been given, and so love only can come back again. It is a beautiful thing to be loved, but it is even more beautiful thing to love. And our love to others must come first. This is the law. It is only as we give that we receive. If we do not feel that we are getting all the joy and happiness and love out of life that we might get, it is for us to stop and consider why this is so. The fullness of life comes to us only as we give out, live out the fullness that is in us. This is the only way to attain realization of power. In benefiting another, any other, we ourselves receive the inflow. If this is not so, invariably and evidently, then there is something wrong in us. I do not mean that it is possible or even desirable for us to go through life without making any mistakes. We learn by our mistakes, but more and more I believe that we can come into the way of such complete guidance that we will make no serious misstep. We all of us want health, but we must bring more than our thoughts to bear on the bringing of health. We must feel as well as think. One does not interfere with the other. The feeling must be in the inspiration that directs the thought. This is not visionary. It is the most practical thing in life. We need the vision in order to be truly practical. We must hold ourselves open to every influence of good and remember that we are all members one of another. If any man will do my will, he shall know of the doctrine. Through doing good to others, we will come into realization. There's no other way. We never get any satisfaction from trying any other way. Sometimes we say, so-and-so did me an evil turn. Shall I then do him good? Yes, even more so than ever. Life is a continual adjustment and overcoming of false conditions by the real. We make a great deal too much of what we call evil in other people's lives. Altogether, too much is made of the transitory and immature on the surface of life. These are only as contrast to the real and abiding. Kindness in ourselves begets kindness in others. These are the real things, the real riches, kindness and gentleness and faith. These are the things that we store up eternally and that none can take from us. We are only wasting our time when we work for what is not real and lasting. It is when we become one with not only those who love us, but with those who hate and distrust us, that we realize the greatest power. This is the real success in life. This is the living of the larger life. If we can only put away from us all sense of separateness, we can never feel near to anyone while we distrust or dislike him. The person we hate or dislike is just as much a part of us as the one we like, just as much as our hand is part of our body. And when we feel ourselves separate from another, we cut off, as it were, a part of ourselves, a vital part. The more we ourselves develop, the more we see to love in others, and the closer we come to what is real and good in these others. Our relations with others prove our own development and how far we have traveled in this journey of life. When we come to the point where we feel no unkindness toward any living creature, it seems to me we will have reached one of the highest possible planes of development in this world. If we would only be willing to give all, without thought of reward, give our very selves, then we would come quickly into the life of love. When we have learned to give of ourselves, to give the real things of life, our giving will be of the truest. Life is too short to waste it in condemning, too short to sit in judgment. We have only time enough to see the good, and our greatest realization of power will come as we realize our oneness with all others. For only in this way can we realize our oneness with God and attain to real dominion and power, which comes alone from living the complete, the whole life, the life wherein the Spirit of love guides and directs in the way of all truth, bringing at last the full realization that man is a son of God endowed with eternal life. The end. End of chapter, and also end of the reading of the book titled Dominion and Power, or The Science of Life and Living by Charles Brodie Patterson. Before you head out, show some love and hit that like button. If you like what you see and what you hear on this channel, please do subscribe. And if you think that someone can benefit from this audiobook, please do share it with your friends and family. And I look forward to connecting again with you here on my channel at the next video, wherever that may be.